Hello, everyone. Good morning. Hope life is good. I'm excited for our chat here. You probably know me, Dr. Andrew, and I'm here with a good friend of myself and my family and my wife, and also kind of our family as well for this week as she's hanging out and living in our house. Brittany. Brittany, I feel like I'm going to probably call you BK.
That's fine.
Her name is not BK, but that's what we affectionately know her as. So we've mentioned for a couple days and a few weeks now here that we're going to have a chance to talk a little bit more deeply about sleep. This is a question that a lot of the new moms, new parents in our practice have, is when can my newborn sleep by themselves? How can I best get them to sleep? What is normal? What are these regressions that people talk about? Why do people tell me to let them cry? There's so many questions about sleep, and it can really be a confusing as well as a really passionate world. People get really heated about sleep. They either want to tell you their horror stories about how their child never slept, or they want to brag about how they have the perfect child and they just, from the second they came out, they never had to worry about sleep. There's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of misinformation, and that's what we want to do our best this morning to take some time to clear that up. Throughout our conversation, either if you're joining us live here or if you're watching a replay, let us know what questions you have. Pop them in the comments here. We'll make sure we address them either in whatever forum is appropriate. Maybe a response here, maybe a private conversation later. We want to make sure that more than anything, we address the issues that you are personally dealing with. But before we even get into those specifics, we've got to understand the framework here that this is, like I said, a frustrating topic, and there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of guilt that happens amongst parents, and that is the last thing that this is going to be about. That's the last thing that we want to do with you all this morning, is be someone else that's telling you what you should do or should not do. I know that's something you would agree that when you're helping parents, it's not a list of do's and don'ts. It's understanding how newborns work. It's understanding what makes them tick to the best that we have. we don't really have that quite mastered, but to the best that we understand, the best that science has grasped, understanding how we can best give them their best chance of thriving. So we're not about telling you what to do or don't do. We're not about judging your choices, but a lot of parents feel pressured into making certain things or doing things they don't want to do, like letting their child cry or not letting them sleep in a certain position or a certain way that they feel is best. And that's what really is frustrating. And to be frank, that's what really sucks, when parents aren't supported to do what they feel is best, and when they feel like they have to do something that is against their instincts, against their internal desires. That's not right. So that is what this morning is about. Before we get too fired up and passionate and ranting about all those things, though, I want to make sure that you know a little bit about who Brittany is. So yes, she is our doula, helping us with our impending birth here, which is any second, hopefully very soon for Laura's sake. She's good and done with this whole pregnancy thing at 40 plus weeks. So she's around helping us with birth, but she's also mom. She's also an infant sleep educator. So introduce people to yourselves.
Right.
What is an infant sleep educator?
An infant sleep educator, it's very different from infant sleep trainer. You'll hear that word a lot. But my role is I like to go into families' homes, but sometimes it happens over the internet or a phone call. But really digging down to the why do you want help? So a lot of parents say, I want my baby to sleep more. We all enjoy that. I enjoy that. But really it's why, so that you can get the house clean, so that and so a lot of what I like to do is trying to find the parents' goals and helping them build their community and have resources to be able to make that happen. If their goal is so that they can get more sleep, then it may be enlisting the role of their partner a little bit more, and then they can get a little extra sleep. So I really like to teach parents what is normal, because there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings, a lot of old wives' tales, and seriously, so much advice.
There's a lot of, this is how we did it and we're fine.
Yeah, which anecdotal evidence can be helpful, but it's not always the best. Yeah. So really trying to support parents, tell them this is normal, you're not insane, and
you might be insane.
Yeah, we might be. Sometimes I feel insane. Yeah. But things are going to be okay, and this is once you have that mindset of things are actually normal, that helps so much. So
you might be insane, but you're not alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Having someone come alongside you and say, it's okay to trust your instincts. That's helpful.
That's
so
awesome.
that's a lot that I do is.
And you've been through this yourself because you've got 3 little ones
I
now.
do. And my
youngest is 15
youngest
or 14
is
months?
13 months.
13 months.
My oldest is 5.5, and we really struggled with sleep with him. And so I did a lot of research and
With Benji or Duda?
with Benji.
The oldest.
And it seems that I was a little bit worked up with him around sleep, and the more that I've relaxed and trusted my instincts, the better my other kids have done with sleep. So that's helped
That's awesome.
a lot.
That's how it's probably analogous to everything in life. The more you
Yeah.
chill and trust your instincts, the better things are going to happen.
Exactly.
Well, I know you're not all that familiar with our specific, what we do at Thrive here from living across the country, but exactly what you just said is what we're about with goals. That's anyone who's been in our office knows that that's something we ask in our paperwork. That's something we're going to have a conversation about on your first visit, is what's important to us is what's important to you in matching up those goals and doing whatever we can to help achieve those goals. So excited for this little chat about sleep. Before we get into some of the specific myths and specific things that we want to address, like we were just sharing before we hit live here, we need to take a step back and make sure that we have the proper kind of premise and foundation here. And as a prenatal pediatric focused chiropractor, that's really got to be our starting point for this conversation, is the role of the nervous system in sleep. Everything that we're going to discuss, whether it's more behavioral approaches, like maybe try this method instead of that, whether it's informational, that is all with the underlying assumption that physically, medically, health-wise, everything is good, everything is clear. If that's not the case, then there could be so many more issues that your newborn or your child is struggling to sleep. I can tell you story after story of kids who, little newborns, maybe 2 months, 5 months, 2 years old, that weren't sleeping well. That was a frustration for parents that they had kind of just assumed was the best it was going to be. They came to the office for other reasons. Maybe it was ear infections, maybe it was nursing or colic. And a couple weeks later, they're like, okay, those things are great, but also the kid's sleeping better. It's not a bad side effect. So what we do with the nervous system by calming that underlying obstruction and stress and tension within their body physically is going to make a world of difference of allowing them to sleep. And it's going to make some of the things that we'll talk about appropriate and safer, or at the very least, dramatically more effective. So that is kind of step 1A here. Before we even go into how we can navigate these various sleep challenges, let's make sure that we're all on the same page with understanding that proper nervous system function is going to be the root of all of that. And I know you said we don't need to spend a ton of time on that, but that's something that you've mentioned with your clients as well, right? That
yes.
You see that help them very frequently.
And I see that even I deal with a lot of expecting and new moms, and if their baby won't nurse on one side, probably should go see a chiropractor, or not even just chiropractic care, but holistic care as well. But everything starts with making sure they're aligned. If you have a traumatic birth,
especially there, that
is so important to have your baby adjusted and to be in good care with a good chiropractor. And Andrew's even adjusted my little girl before.
Back in first birth.
Yes.
When Zeke was entering the world.
And it's amazing to see the benefits that chiropractic has. And we were talking a little bit about how the connections that they're making from the beginning. A baby and a child's brain makes 4 times as many connections as the internet. So you have web pages and hyperlinks, and a baby's brain has 4 times as many connections. That's ginormous.
Take that, Google.
So the connections that they're forming are very important. Every single thing that they see or experience is building a connection in their brain. And so if their nervous system isn't functioning correctly as the basis, then it's just going to be like trial upon trial, and it's going to be hard. And so it's always good to make sure that our children have the best health possible.
Absolutely.
And then we can go from there.
Yeah, and then we can work with some of the behavioral things or tactical things that parents might do. So, couldn't have said it better myself. Let's assume then that that's taken care of. Let's assume that you're under our care, you're here, kids are doing great. or maybe you're watching this from out of state and you've got another great pediatric chiropractor that we've hooked you up with. Let's assume that that is taken care of, and now let's go on to what is actually going on with infant neurology. You started touching on it a little bit there, but that is really going to be our framework for understanding what we need to do to help support them, is understanding what's actually taking place. When I asked before our webinar here earlier this week, I polled some parents and said, hey, what questions do you have about sleep? What do you want to understand better? What can we help you with? And one of the suggestion was, can we just understand how infants work better, infant neurology, infant development? And that, I think, would be the great place to start, since you already did a little bit there. So why don't you just share a little bit more about what, and inevitably this is going to start leading into our first topic here, which is going to be the myth of self-soothing, the myth of, you might hear it as the cry it out approach. That's kind of going to be the first topic we tackle here. So let's start there.
Okay.
You want to share a little bit on that?
Good. Yeah, so a lot of this starts with, I'm going to say a buzzword probably, attachment parenting. And a lot of people have different things come to mind. So I guess what comes to mind when you hear attachment parenting?
Anything from baby wearing or co-sleeping and stuff like that to crazy giant beds with 15 kids in them, stuff like that. There's a wide spectrum. Yeah.
So a lot of people sometimes think that attachment parenting means you have to be with the baby 24/7. You can't work. You are there and you're at their beck and call. And that's not necessarily a true representation, but the attachment theory began in the 50s, which was a very critical time studying child development. And so John Bowlby, he's the grandfather of attachment theory. If you like to write down names and trivia like that, there you go. So there was a study called the imprinting study in 1935, and it basically said that a lack of healthy attachment would lead to long-term struggles, such as delinquency is one, lower intelligence, increased aggression, and depression. So that's just kind of the basis of, if there's not a healthy attachment from a young age, it can cause unhealthy things later on in life.
It's more than just, and this is something we just said before hitting live as well, is that just because, parents often say, oh, well, they don't remember it. Like, you don't remember when you were 3 months old, 6 months old. Just because they don't cognitively remember it does not mean in the slightest that it doesn't affect their hardwiring of their brain and their nervous system.
Right, exactly. So there's something called a hierarchy of needs, and the very first stage that we have with our hierarchy of what we need in life is proximity or closeness, which lasts until about the age of 2. So there's this innate need to be close, to have proximity, and that doesn't, again, necessarily mean that you have to be wearing your baby 24/7. That doesn't work for some people, and that's totally fine, but they need to know that they are safe and cared for.
Yeah.
It's a very healthy, normal thing.
Yeah. That's why, just a week ago we had that baby wearing, workshop here at the office. And that's why baby wearing can be so beneficial, is because newborn spends 9 months close, warm, cuddly, soft, muffled sounds, hearing mom's voice all the time, everything that is peaceful and calming in the world. And then we expect them to come out and lay flat on their back alone and sleep 12 hours a night. So there's a huge gap between what they've known and what we then expect. And realizing that and thinking through that can help be more empathetic and sympathetic towards a frustrated little one, and at the same time help give you the answers and tools to what you need to do then to give them the easiest transition into normal life. So anyways.
So, you kind of hit on it there. A lot of this has to do with our expectation versus what is actually happening. So a lot of parents expect that, oh, babies sleep all the time. Well, when they're like 1 or 2 days old, usually, yeah, they do, unless there's an underlying cause.
Yeah.
But the longer they're alive, a couple weeks, they start to not really just go to sleep on their own. Some babies do. Some babies just fall asleep. But it's not normal. So you may expect that your baby is going to sleep through the night, and that's what a lot of people say, but actually the term sleeping through the night, if you're reading any literature or reading scientific studies on sleep, sleeping through the night by definition means 5 hours.
Yeah.
So when they say, oh, this
not
many,
8 to 8.
no, this many babies, this percentage of babies were sleeping through the night by the age of 6 weeks. Some babies do sleep 5-hour stretches at night for 6 weeks. Some babies don't hit that until they're 2. Yeah. And that's okay. That's normal, which is kind of terrifying to hear as a parent, like, what, my baby might not sleep through the night until they're 2. But there are so many ways that you can parent your child to love sleep, and teaching them a healthy attitude about sleep can be the best thing. If they're stressed out when they go to sleep, they're not going to ever really be able to rest fully. So teaching them that sleep is a safe place to go and a safe place in which you can remain. That is a big thing.
Yeah, and that it is incredibly difficult, and that's one thing that if someone told you getting into the parenting journey that this was going to be easy, I apologize. In no sense of the world is parenting an easy job, whether it's what we're specifically talking about now, sleep and not getting as much sleep as you might want or like, or the struggles of learning how to shape a young character and their value system and many things. Sleep's easy compared to that. So we don't have an easy. That's probably another. Should have put that in the intro, so then you could have just tuned out if you already done. It's not. There is no easy solution. We want to give you options that let you feel like confident. You can, confident, and like you're providing your child a loving, safe environment. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Sorry. So with that framework, then what we can understand is that a newborn, their brain is different than what our brain is. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that's not a surprise to you. And what they're able to rationalize or understand is different than what we're able to rationalize or understand. For example, when we were to wake up in the middle of the night, you probably don't panic. You probably don't freak out. You understand, okay, where am I? What do I have needs? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Am I thirsty? Am I cold? Why did I wake up? Nothing is on fire. Let's just go back to sleep. A newborn, they have one mode. Their brain is in that original, and hopefully I'm not jumping ahead of more stuff that you want to say. They're in that original primitive survival mode. All they know at that point is their deep centers of their brain, stuff like the amygdala, those original developmental centers that really have one goal, and that is to make sure that they survive to the next stage. And that's when they start to develop more frontal function, more of the voluntary decision making and choices and will and stuff like that. At this point, it is just survival. And so when a newborn, they basically have two modes. There's, am I happy, warm, loving, dry, like, is everything good or is everything bad? There's no in between. That's why you have comfy, cuddly, smiley, sleeping baby, or you have screaming, crying baby. Yeah. Crying at that point is not a manipulation tactic. It is their only means of communication. That's their only way of telling you something is wrong.
And you started talking about the amygdala. So you know this, that a baby is born with a developed amygdala. And so that is responsible for the fight or flight mode. So if they pee in their diaper and they don't want to be wet, they're going to cry, and they're in fight or flight mode of get this changed. Not all babies do that, but they aren't born with a developed prefrontal cortex. And so they don't have any way to really calm that down. And so if they're in a constant state of stress, releasing all that cortisol into their brain, they can't get that cortisol to calm down. And that can be a very, very difficult place for a baby to remain in.
Exactly. And that's perfect segue into this topic of self-soothing or crying it out that is commonly practiced or recommended. With that, so the understanding of a crying it out method or approach is when, and different people have different recommendations on when you can start this, but at a certain point, the theory is, baby can take care of it themselves, and you just let them cry until they stop crying. From what we've just discussed, hopefully you're starting to raise some red flags on how that would work, because they don't have the ability to figure it out. When they start crying and no one shows up, they keep crying because they're wondering what's going on. They're wondering, why is the world all of a sudden a cold, dark, horrid place where my needs, as primitive as they are not able to be met. So yes, that sleep training, cry it out approach is extremely effective for getting them to sleep. That I will not in any sense of the world deny that. Well, I won't say extremely effective. It gets babies to sleep, maybe not as perfectly as you want them to, but it's not without consequence. And it's not because the baby is learning to soothe. The baby is learning the world is, what I just said, a cold, dark place, and my needs are not going to be met. So when they are reaching that breaking point and soothing or calming down, it's not that they've figured out, oh, wait, everything's okay, my bad, I'm good, let's go back to bed. It's their system broke. It's like if you've got the accelerator slammed to the floor for so long and you reach that red line and you go too long, it's going to blow. That's what's happening. Their system has stressed out to the max and it's reached the limit and it blew the top off and everything crashed. And that's what's happening when they're calming down. It's not calming down at all. It's we're done. We don't know what else to do, and so we just shut down.
Yeah.
That's why when we talk about this, we call it the myth of self-soothing, because it's physically impossible for a newborn to self-soothe because their brain is not able to do that at that point.
And there's actually studies that show that, well, there was a very popular study put out by Today, I think it was on today.com, that said sleep training doesn't cause babies harm. And so it was a very, very hot article passed around on Facebook. And there were 40 babies studied in that case. And they were split into 3 different groups. One was extinction, crying it out. One was letting babies just kind of stay awake until they fell asleep, like staying up in the family room or wherever. And the other one was teaching parents about healthy sleep. And in the end, the babies that they did extinction with, on average, got 20 minutes more sleep per night, which, I mean, I would love a 20-minute nap, I'm not going to lie. But that's not as significant. Is that why I have a big thing of coffee here? Yes, and it's probably my first of many for today. But it's not life-changing. It's not life-changing, no. And there have been a lot of studies that show sometimes babies, when they do extinction and cry it out, they don't actually fall asleep. They just give up, and they just lay there. And it teaches them, like, when you wake up, just be quiet and lay there. And this is something that I didn't know before I started studying this. When in orphanages, babies kind of learn just not to cry because there are not enough caretakers. And so when a baby is adopted or they're in the foster system and they have learned just not to cry, just to kind of get their tough skin, or even in a normal home with a parent or 2 parents, if they've learned that, for babies that are adopted out, it's actually considered a really good thing when they start to cry, because that means they've started to form an attachment with their caregiver. They can feel again. Yes, and I think that's such an amazing thing. I remind myself of that a lot, because when you're in the trenches of parenting and trying to help your babies learn to love sleep, it's easy sometimes to say, okay, I'm just gonna close them off in a room and walk away. It doesn't feel easy because it hurts you, and it I don't know, it's hard. It's hard to hear your baby cry, but some people claim that, it's a quick method, and it is, but it's not. It's not without consequence. It's not without consequence. It's not supporting your baby to sleep well. And I feel like I can speak to this very well because I did sleep train my first. And I, for a while, carried a lot of guilt about that. But when you know better, you do better. When you know more, you're able to do more. Yeah. And so we shouldn't carry guilt about that, because he's a healthy, well-adjusted child now. And he has a very solid attachment, so that helps. But that's one of the things I always give the analogy. The rearview mirror is this big and the windshield is this big, because we don't want to spend all our time looking back. Right. We don't want to spend all our time regretting. There are times you need to go there to understand the future and where you're headed in a better perspective, but that's not the point of what we're sharing is to instill guilt or regret for any changes. It's just understand there are consequences. And like you said, this is one factor amongst many of what's going to determine if a little one develops a strong sense of attachment, a strong sense of self-confidence and self-worth. Our hope is that, when we have columns of what are we doing to support optimal growth and development, what is hindering it, we want everything as possible in that first column. But when there are things that maybe because we didn't have the right information in certain phases of life, or because it's just the best that we can do, the hope is not, what I hope that you hear is not that,
all is lost. It's that, hey, let's just make sure we do enough right things, enough things to
Yes.
support that loving, caring, nurturing environment. Anything else you want to touch on that, or should we hit some other topics?
Just one last thing
Yeah.
that I like to do with my clients. I usually work it into like a 5-minute exercise, but I'll just briefly talk about it. It's to kind of help us be aware of what our babies are feeling. So I usually will hand out a card and it has a statement on it. There's several different statements. One is, I had a nightmare. I don't know what is real life or if I'm safe. One is, my pajamas are too hot and I wet my bed. And so the purpose of this exercise is they look at this card and you're supposed to imagine that you're a senior citizen and you have dementia and you're living in a care facility. And so you wake up in the middle of the night and this is your scenario. Your pajamas are too hot and you've wet yourself. And how you would feel if nobody responded to your crying out. And so when you put it in a different perspective, it helps you have a little bit more empathy towards that baby, because really they rely on us for literally everything. And sometimes we don't know what it is. Their tag in their pajamas could be itchy. Yeah. And so even if they're still whimpering or crying, they're more comfortable in the arms of somebody that they know cares for them and loves them. So crying isn't a bad thing. If they're being cared for.
Communication.
It's communication, absolutely.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's under empathizing and putting, it's not putting yourself in the shoes in the sense of that's kind of hard to do in a sense of an infant, but thinking from their perspective can help draw out that last drop of patience that you have that you thought was gone or anything like that. Yeah, good stuff. So we're gonna let's hit a few other sleep topics. If you're listening here live with us, please throw out questions, specific scenarios that you have, and we can do our best to address those. If you don't, we've got tons of questions that we already had before, and we'll just run through those. Unless you have a better idea, do you want to start with a more fleshing out what is normal versus not normal, and maybe within that talking about regressions, sleep regression? Absolutely.
So let me organize my papers here so I can read a little bit.
Yeah, you're good.
So a lot of times you'll be on a parent forum if you're, I'm on a lot of parent forums.
I think most people are land of Facebook.
It's kind of hard not to. So a lot of parents ask, is this a sleep regression? And that's just kind of like a common term that people use to describe a time when your baby isn't sleeping as well as they were. And there are specific time periods that could be called sleep regressions. I like to call them developmental progressions because it's usually when your baby is learning a new skill or discovering something about themselves. But there are very common time periods when that does happen. The first one would be about 4 months. And so this is, if you've ever heard of the term fourth trimester, that's about the first 3 to 4 months when a baby is, a mom is usually still very attached. Everyone wants to hold the baby, especially when they're teeny tiny and just cute and squishable. But they're coming out of this fourth trimester becoming more aware. This is when, if you have older kids, your baby, when they're nursing, is going to flip their head back and look at the other kids. And
more distractible.
More distractible. They're becoming aware of the world outside. And so when the baby's born, they have a sensor barrier. They're not really disturbed as easily. But when they come out of this, their sensory barrier becomes thinner and thinner as time goes on. And so at 4 months, they become pretty alert. This is when, for some babies, they kind of fall into a rhythm with their napping. Other babies don't. But they might cluster feed and become more aware of being alone during very vulnerable times. And so it's a very heightened time of developmental progression, which others would see as sleep progression. So 4 months can be a very, very difficult time. But this is when your baby needs you to step in and say, I'm here, it's okay, you're developing and this is good, and celebrate the little things. And you can look up different exercises that you can do with your baby. I really like the book, The Wonder Weeks, and they have an app that you can download that talks about the different developmental stages your baby goes through, and it gives suggestions on this is a really good time to play airplane with your baby, because that will foster what they are developing and what their brain is learning.
We've never personally used that one, but I've heard from multiple parents how eerily on point it is.
It's very,
Yeah.
very good. It's it's
Helpful.
at least helpful.
And it gives you like it gives you some information that can help you go like, oh,
Oh.
that's why all this is
Yes.
happening. And once again, that helps draw out that extra patience. That helps bring out the
Absolutely.
empathy that you need to motor through and
Mhm.
take care of the little one.
So that's a big one, 4 months. The next one that is commonly seen is 9 months, and that's because it's a very, very heightened time of separation anxiety. They feel that. So baby becomes more social, they're interacting, some of them are cruising around, and they're seeing the world through a new perspective, really. It's like, wow, this is the world, this is so exciting, but then they have a little bit of separation anxiety with what they know is safe. And so this is another good time that the parents can help their baby see that it is okay, and we're here with you, and we're going to help you through this. So I'll just briefly touch on the other developmental progressions. 12 to 13 months, again, they're starting to walk. A lot of babies, they're really excited to just explore, and so they're learning so much in such a short amount of time. And it's definitely they're not going to be wanting to sleep. They're just wanting to practice. I mean, I've walked in on my babies when they wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night on all fours, just kind of rocking back and forth because they're ready to go. They want to crawl. So then there's 18 months.
Chomping at the bit.
For sure. There's 18 months is a big one. And then again at 24 months, which is a lot of parents think, we're in this good rhythm. And then around the age of 2, it hits and they're like, but this is not supposed to be happening anymore. But it's very common. 2 years is a big one. And a lot of babies are working on dropping their naps or dropping one of their naps, depending, but that's different for every baby. So,
So those are normal, traditional, like when are big pivot points within development that you might see more significant changes, or well, they were sleeping for X number of hours and now seems like we took a step back. Other things that we see all the time affect progress and care for different challenges in the office are when illnesses pop up. So when your little one's fighting something off, basically throw everything out the window and you're going to be up all night nursing and loving and whatever you need to do. And the other one is big growth spurts can throw a wrench into this, which the growth spurts oftentimes will correlate with these progressions that BK was just mentioning. But those are other ones to keep in mind as well, as when parents are, especially older kids with behavioral challenges, they're like, oh my gosh, it's like they're the worst kid ever for a couple of weeks. I'm like, well, have they also started like eating 3 times the amount of food that they typically are? Yes. Well, we can start to think, okay, maybe they're just like shooting through another growth spurt, and that's just gonna literally physically is pulling at the tension within their nervous system and just wiring them, making them a little bit high strung for a while. So there's some other tips to think about that might help you pull through some extra empathy to your patients during that time. You might start to be wondering, okay, we got this 4 month, 12, 13. Is there ever not a sleep progression? And if you want to look at it that way, if that helps give you the extra patience and strength to make it through, then yes, think about it that way. These are just some of the bigger pivot points or moments. I think it'll be helpful to also give parents a little bit of information on what to expect for just a normal, happy sleep patterns. But before that, let's jump to a little question here. Sure. It's a different topic, but I want to make sure we cover this here. So when her little one was born, she was unable to nurse due to some health issues. So daughter's been on a bottle ever since. She feels comfortable with the bottle, still gives her one before naps and for bed. How can I change this reliance in a gentle way to show her different ways to fall asleep on her own without her crying? So is that an issue? Any thoughts on transitioning away from bottle to sleep? Yeah,
so something that I like to kind of preach to my parents is it's not a problem unless it's a problem. So if you're good with how things are going, then that's great. Keep doing what works for you. You might be trying to fix something that's not an issue. Yeah, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But I mean, if there are issues that maybe the dentist says, you should stop giving them a bottle, then that is time to start working into how you can figure that out. Some options are trying a different type of cup at night. So if that's a dental issue, you could try a different type of cup. But a lot of this is a scenario where I would probably work one-on-one and try to figure out how it would work specifically for that family.
Yeah, have some more specific questions for what's going on.
For sure. But it's going to take parenting. And I say you're going to have to parent your baby to sleep or your child to sleep. And so figuring out how that's going to work best for you. For some people, and this even goes back to when they're infants, for some people, it's putting the baby in a carrier and walking them around the house until they're able to go into a safe state of sleep. And so at this age, it might take lying on the floor in your baby or in your child's nursery and patting their bottom until they fall asleep, or stroking their back, and then gradually helping them feel more comfortable and confident and weaning down the time that it takes to lay them down, but them still feeling safe. So it's kind of a particular question that I would love to maybe
you'd have to dig into
about that. But that is something that it's possible to do.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So circling back then to here's a scenario. Yes. Yeah. Parent is telling you, this is how my child's sleeping. They're getting up X amount of often, and they're like saying it as if it's a problem. Mm-hmm. And you're like, and perfect. Like, is there an issue here?
Yeah.
So what would that look like? What would be normal, healthy newborn sleep?
That's going to be completely different for a lot of people. So as a recommendation, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, because if your baby is breastfed, then they're probably going to wake more often because breast milk digests a lot more easily than formula. So a lot of times formula-fed babies sleep through the night or sleep longer stretches earlier because it's not digesting as quickly. And so it's a little bit easier for them to get some solid chunks of sleep. So babies typically sleep through the night on average. It is, again, about the age of 2 to 2.5, which can be daunting. So at 6 months, it is very common and normal and even optimal for babies to be waking multiple times a night, especially, again, if they're breastfed. They're going to need a little bit of nourishment. Some babies, honestly, it is such a one baby at a time thing. But if I had somebody come to me and say, my baby is only taking 20-minute naps during the day, but they're sleeping 8 hours at night, it'd be like, okay, well then let's figure out how to get some you time during the day.
Yeah.
And build your village a little bit so that you can get some rest, or someone can take your baby so you can go get your nails done or whatever. Yeah. So you're figuring out how to help the mom, because that, for a lot of people, they'd be like, that's great. I'd love to get 8 hours of sleep at night.
Yeah.
I'd gladly take 20-minute naps for that. So I think I would be kind of hard-pressed for a parent to say something where I'd be like, you should probably see somebody and get that checked out. Because there are so many variations of normal with infant sleep.
And that's I think the key takeaway is having the expectations of not sleeping through the night, of not basically understanding that you're going to have to work as a team to help raise this child so that you get enough rest, so that you get enough self-care, self-love, and that so your newborn gets the love and care and attachment that they need. Breastfeeding can be really helpful for this, because it, at least in our personal situation, it allowed for a combination of Zeke, because baby number 2 is not entering the world yet. It allowed for Zeke to have the closeness, the attachment, the comfort and love that he needed, while at the same time allowing Laura to get the rest, because I actually recently came across this term. Have you ever heard of breast sleeping?
Yes.
I thought that was a clever combination of words. Somebody actually coined that. Breast sleeping is usually a combination of mom side-lying, nursing with newborn, side-lying, and they can kind of both nurse to sleep. If baby, in that sort of situation, mom is close enough, obviously, that they're nursing, that they can understand if baby needs anything else, or if baby is fussy or disturbed or anything like that. So many more details and thoughts go into the topic of co-sleeping, and that's not something that we can tackle in this setting. Personal conversations or working with BK directly might be able to answer some questions, or we can direct you towards some resources that would answer questions on co-sleeping. But for us in that case, it was huge, because Zeke was happy, Laura was happy, everyone was sleeping. And that's really the goal.
That's great.
So that's just examples of what life could look like to allow a newborn to nurse past 3 or 6 or 12 months in that sort of relationship. So yeah. And
So,
anything else you want to touch on with that?
A lot of it just depends on a child or a baby's sleep personality. My oldest loves sleep. He's 5.5, and if he's at home, if he's not at school, he'll take a nap every day. If he does have school, he comes home and falls asleep in the car. He's like one that if we're just hanging out doing stuff at home and I let him rest instead of take a nap, he'll probably fall asleep on the couch. My 3-year-old, on the other hand, she could just go probably 3 days without sleeping, and she'd be very grumpy, but she just has a different sleep personality. And so even each child within your family, it's going to take a little bit of different parenting to figure out how you can best support their sleep.
Yeah, kids are fun.
They are really fun.
So some other thoughts and questions that people had as we were preparing for this is, what about soothing without picking up a child? Is that something that is a worthwhile goal? Why would, so either answer that question in the sense of how would you do it, or maybe even back up and say, why would we want to do that if that's the case?
I think there would definitely be like a how old are they type question in there and what's going on in your family. But again, if you are around another baby and they're crying and no one is attending to them, it kind of makes you feel like, okay, what can I do? It stresses you out. So there is something inside of us that when a baby is crying says help. And
that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's
not a broken part.
Yes, and that's what I love to do, is come alongside parents who usually parents don't seek out sleep education or sleep training or anything like that until they're at their wit's end. Which if we can get them before they even have their baby, then that would be the most helpful thing.
Yeah.
But most people are really, really stressed out at their wit's end and they just need help. And a lot of times, like the way I was with my first, I just looked for anyone who could help me. I was desperate. And I would have loved to have somebody come alongside me and say, it's okay to feel like you should pick your baby up. And when you feel that, pick them up. And I want to be that voice for people who want to trust their instincts. Do it. It's good. So you can definitely soothe the baby. Like I was saying, patting their bottom is a really, really good one. If your baby moves around a lot in their crib or their co-sleeper or bassinet, and they kind of wake themselves, and you want to try to help them settle without fully picking them up, just reaching over and patting their bottom. That's a very, very soothing rhythm for them to feel. I also think that sound machines are extremely wonderful tools. I have like 7 of them in my house. But just, they love that white noise because when they were in the womb, they heard a whoosh whoosh and a
like
heartbeat.
Muffled tones.
Yeah, so it's very soothing to them. Even as adults, it can be very soothing. So there are times when you can soothe your baby without picking them up. I would ask yourself why in certain scenarios you would want to do that. And sometimes there's a good answer for that. And
I can share a little bit of just from our personal experience, how that's looked in a few different ways, which will touch on some of the stuff you shared earlier, where, probably from the 4 to 8 to 10 month range, Zeke more often than not was falling asleep in the Tula, a baby wearing device for us, whether that was Laura or I. He loved being in that thing. We were ninja skilled enough that we could transfer him into a bed with him out without him waking up, which is the scariest thing you ever do as a parent. And so that worked well for us in that situation. So when we were making that transfer, when he was going from sleeping in the Tula to the bed, a lot of times it would be okay, he's mostly sleeping still, but we need to make sure he stays down. So it might be a rubbing the back, or patting the bum, or shushing or humming a song that, you help put him to sleep. Anything along those lines can help calm him down and help the little one feel your presence and know that you're there and taking care of them until they are more comfortably sleeping. And then you can, tiptoe float your way out of the room. Another one, as he's gotten older for us, where we're able to, have conversations and communicate in the last 3 to 6 months, it's been more of, talking you through, okay, it's, we're going to go to sleep now. One of the things that we say over and over again is, if you need me, I'm going to come back up. like when he's laying down. If you need me, I'm going to come back up. And he gets to the point now, as I'm walking out, he says, back up. Yes, yes, buddy, if you need me, I'm going to come back up. And so that's one of the things that we want to reiterate is, yes, even if you are falling asleep on your own and you're comfortable with that, it's with the understanding that if for whatever stupid, silly reason, like if you have Fuzzy Llama in the bed and you don't want him in the bed anymore, which happens,
So common.
we're going to come back up and we're going to take care of you and it's going to be okay. And honestly, we had the first 12 to 15 months of life, like bedtime was a 45 to an hour minute long process. And there are so many days where we thought, oh my gosh, how much of our lives would we have back if we didn't have to spend an hour or two every day putting this stinking child to bed? But now it's cliche, but we really can look back and think, you know what? Wasn't that big of a deal. It was fine. It was worth it.
Yeah.
Can't wait to start it all again.
You're spending that extra time with your kid too.
And it's in our case, we feel like it has really prepared him to be attached and feel cared for and feel loved, and for the most part, it's great now. So that's kind of how these various tidbits have worked out for us, from breast sleeping and falling asleep nursing through the first year-ish of life to wearing the Tula to now having a conversation about we're still there for you and we can love on you even if you're falling asleep by yourself. So that's just kind of some specific personal examples from our situation that has helped apply some of these principles of how we can help him sleep in a comfortable way for him that still lets us regain sanity. One other tidbit that's helpful is there's times within that have been rough nights that he was not cooperating. He was not, like, we were in there with him and he was crying. What's been helpful then is kind of taking shifts. Like there's been times maybe Laura and I has been up for 30 or 45 minutes. Maybe we had a rough day ourselves and we kind of tag out. Like someone comes downstairs as the other person's doing dishes or making food and they're just, you don't really even need to say much. You just know, okay, I'm checked out, I'm done. You go take care of this kid. Honestly, even another specifically practical, tactical thing that helps me be more patient back when it was the days of literally like laying in there till he fell asleep, I would listen to an audiobook. I would just hang out, relaxing with him, listen to a book, listen to music. And I was there loving for him. I could comfort him, talk to him if he needed it. But I also didn't feel like I'm watching the clock and wasting my life away. I feel like I can love on him while doing something that I enjoy as well. So that's a hodgepodge of random tips. I don't know if that sparked any other thoughts or things, but I just wanted to make it practical and specific to our lives as well.
So there are I like to give parents a sleep menu of how you can help your baby get down to sleep. And so baby wearing is a good one. Dancing your baby down, putting on some soft music and like literally dancing with them. Bouncing if you have a little yoga ball or if you just want to do some squats. Putting them in a stroller or using a swing or anything like that. There are a lot of myths surrounding sleep props. So a pacifier or baby wearing or a lovey or things like that where people say, or nursing is a huge one. Why would I don't want them to build that habit. Well, why?
Yeah.
It's optimal for their health and they're being comforted and going to sleep in a natural state. And so it's good to have a variety of ways that you can put your baby down. And 1 week wearing them in a carrier could work great, and the next week, not at all.
Yep.
So having a variety of things you can try, and if you have a partner or someone who's there to help you, having them also have different ways that they can put baby down, get them down for a nap is super helpful. But your energy when you're putting your baby down to sleep is probably one of the most important things. So if you're extremely stressed out and you're crying and baby's crying, that no one's going to feel comfortable. Yeah. So that's a scenario what I would say if you've been trying for 20, 30 minutes, nothing's happening, you're both getting stressed out, stop. Put your baby down, play a game with them, read them a book, enjoy a little bit of time together, come back to it in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But definitely take time to make sure that you're in a positive headspace because we can't pour from an empty cup. So if we're not in a good space and we're not feeling calm and confident, then our baby isn't going to either.
Anyone can tell, or you can notice when there's tension or someone's really wound up. And babies are 10 times as intuitive and instinctual there, where they
For sure.
feed off of your energy and feed off of your nervous system status. If you are in that gas pedal fight or flight stress mode, or if you're calm, relaxed, in a healthy state yourself. So there might be times you just need to say, try again later, because this isn't healthy. Or, I mean, in the sense of a really worked up, anxious, stressed out mom struggling with postpartum anxiety or depression, don't feel like you're breaking your baby if you need to set them down and walk away for a second. Maybe they will cry, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what you need to love on them better in a few minutes. It's ideal if you have a village, if you have a tribe, if you have partners that you can rely on that can step in those moments. But inevitably, there's going to be times where you're having that sort of day when you're alone, and you just need to set them down and step away for a second until you can gather yourself and get back to loving on them as you know how to do best.
Absolutely.
We probably take another minute or two and then need to wrap things up. Is there any thoughts that you had that we didn't get to that you feel like are important for parents to know?
I think just reinforcing that babies are unpredictable, and they're going to do what they're going to do. They can't communicate well with us other than they cry or babble or screech. But if you have the education beforehand and you're able to put it into perspective of, okay, my baby is going through this developmental progression. If you can see things through the eyes of your child, then it will help you be able to respond a lot better, because there are going to be some major challenges. That's just life. It's parenting. And I mean, think about your baby's brain develops so rapidly and so much in the first 3 years, especially compared to how it develops throughout the rest of our life. So this is when they're building those connections. And we want to reinforce the positive connections. If we're reinforcing the stress and the anxiety, then the positive connections are going to be weeded out as their brain makes these connections. And then they're going to constantly be in this state of fight or flight. And so definitely trying to remember, okay, my tiny baby's brain is developing, and the way I respond to them is going to affect them. It doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, because I can lose control sometimes. But again, the way that we respond to that is very important as well.
So true. This is even though they won't remember it, even though you think it's not a big deal, you're helping hardwire their brain, their development for optimal health later on, both physically, emotionally, mentally. Just keep loving on your little ones. So there's a few links that I think we're going to drop in the comments here afterwards. One of them is a YouTube video you said you really like called Brain Power.
Yes,
what's that about?
It just talks about kind of what I've talked about with the connections in the brain being 4 times as many as the internet even, and putting it into perspective, what every single interaction with your child is building their brain. And attention is the most powerful tool to feed the brain. So it's just a short 10-minute YouTube video that really digs into it, and it's backed by a study from Harvard, and there's resources along with the video that you can look at.
Awesome. So we'll drop that in the comments. There's a few articles that really walk through that myth of self-soothing and help, if you want to dig into that a little more, understand some of that research and cortisol levels and stuff like that. We'll try to share some of those. Was there anything else we want to put in there?
I think.
Oh, why don't can we share like your contact information if parents want to reach out to you? I think that would be helpful, because that's, since it is such a specific one-on-one thing, sometimes you need more than this. You might need a one-on-one consultation work, and they can do that even if they're not in Colorado.
For sure.
Where you guys live. Were you gonna say something else?
Yeah, one other thing that I just kind of forgot to mention, the environment that you live in, that you submerge yourself in, can really have a profound effect on your children. So a lot of times closer to bedtime, we like to dim the lights in our house, or just kind of turn lights off and only have a few on, turning the TV off. And screens. A lot of times babies are overstimulated, and children, even we get overstimulated. And so really being aware of those different things, blue lights, anything like that, and trying to calm the environment and then prepare to go into your nap routine or your bedtime routine, which can also be very helpful to do similar things as your child gets ready for bed.
Yeah, for sure. Those are valuable tools, more things you can use from your sleep menu. I like that terminology.
Yeah.
Options to choose from and
Put it on the fridge.
Tools that you have. All right, guys, hope this has been valuable. Like I said, if you're tuning in later on Facebook or YouTube here, leave some comments. Let us know if you have specific questions on this and how we can best help you. But main theory, hopefully, the one thing you got out of this is keep on keeping on. It's not easy, but it's so worth it. Keep loving your kids, and you will never regret that. Thank you for hanging out. Appreciate it. Let's go see the damage of what the kids have been up to at home. Have a great day, guys.